Evan lived alone on the far edge of the cold border colony, in a small wooden shelter surrounded by endless snow. The nights here were silent, dangerous, and colder than any human world. Evan liked the quiet life, the simple routine, and the peaceful darkness. But everything changed on one strange night when he heard a soft knock at his door, a sound that did not belong in such a lonely place. At first he thought he imagined it. No one ever visited him, especially not at midnight. But then the knock came again, a little stronger, a little more desperate. Evan felt a strange worry in his chest as he slowly opened the door. Standing in the falling snow was an alien woman. Shivering so badly, her arms almost dropped the two small alien children she held close. Her skin had a soft blue tone, her hair was silver, and her eyes were wide with fear. Snow covered her clothes, and her breath came out in weak trembling. "Clouds," she whispered, almost too weak to speak. "Human. Please, my children are freezing. We have nowhere else to go." Her voice broke as she looked at him, begging him to answer. Before Evan could even understand what was happening, she said something that shocked him so deeply that he froze in place. "I will warm your bed, human, if you let us stay." Then she looked down at the children and added, "My children need a father. Please." Evan felt his heart stop. No one had ever said something like that to him, not in this quiet, cold world. For a moment, he wondered if she was joking, but the look in her eyes told him she was not. She was desperate, scared, and out of options. Before he could speak, Evan noticed something behind her. In the snow were strange footprints, large and sharp. Nothing like human boots, nothing like her feet either. Something had been following her. Something dangerous. Evan stepped outside a little and looked into the dark forest. The wind blew the snow sideways, but he could hear something. A low growl, slow and deep, like a creature waiting, watching. Lyra, the alien woman, kept looking over her shoulder, her eyes full of fear, as if she expected something to jump out at any moment. "Please," she whispered again. "They will find us. They will take my children. Please let us in before they come." Evan stared at her children. Their small bodies shook from the cold. Their hands clung to their mother's clothes. They looked weak, tired, and close to collapsing. Evan felt something inside him change. He could not leave them in the snow. But he also did not know what danger she carried with her. He looked again at the footprints. They were fresh, very fresh. The creature, or whatever it was, had been here only minutes ago. That meant it could still be close. Evan heard the growl again, slightly louder, slightly closer. His heart beat faster. He knew he had only seconds to make a decision if he closed the door. She and her children might die from the cold, or from the creature in the woods. If he let them in, he could be inviting danger into his own shelter, maybe even death. The wind blew harder. Snow hit their faces. The children cried softly. Lyra hugged them tightly and looked at Evan with desperate, shaking eyes. "Human, please, we will die out here." Evan finally made his choice. In one quick motion, he stepped aside and pulled them into his shelter, shutting the door just as another growl echoed from the forest, louder this time, closer, almost at his doorway. The door shook slightly, as if something heavy brushed against it. Lyra gasped and pulled her children close. Evan grabbed his old rifle, his hands shaking. He did not know what he had just brought into his life, but he knew one thing clearly. This night was only the beginning. The hunters were out there, and now they knew exactly where the widow was hiding. Inside the small wooden shelter, the fire burned softly, giving a warm orange glow that pushed away the cold darkness outside. Lyra sat near the fire with her children, holding them close as their small hands warmed slowly. Their bodies were weak, but their eyes showed relief for the first time. Evan watched them quietly, still trying to understand what danger he had allowed into his home. Lyra's breathing was uneven, like she had run for hours. Snow melted slowly off her clothes and dripped onto the wooden floor. The children leaned against her, too tired to speak. Evan brought them blankets, soft food, and warm water. He spoke gently, but he could tell Lyra was still afraid. Her eyes kept jumping to the door and windows, like she expected the hunters to break in at any moment. Evan finally sat down across from her. "You can rest now," he said. "You're safe inside." But Lyra shook her head quickly. "Safe? No, not yet. Not while they are searching." Her voice cracked with fear. Evan wanted to ask more, but he didn't want to push her. Instead, he stayed quiet. Giving her time, he watched the snowstorm outside through the window. The world was white, thick, and silent again. But he knew something dangerous was hidden in that silence. After a few minutes, Lyra gently placed her children under the blankets and stood up. She walked to the window and stared into the snowy forest as if she could see something moving out there. Evan noticed her hands shaking. She was scared, but also hiding something. He could feel it. Finally, she whispered, "My name is Lyra. My children are Sira and Noak." She took a slow breath. "I thanked you for opening the door. But you need to know why we came here." Evan leaned forward. "What happened? Who was following you?" Lyra closed her eyes for a moment before speaking. "My husband. He died yesterday." Her voice softened painfully. "He died trying to protect us." Her lips trembled. "He told me to run. He told me to take the children and find a human." Evan frowned. "Find a human? Why?" Lyra hesitated. She lowered her head, her silver hair falling around her face. "Because humans scare the hunters," she whispered. "They fear your kind." Evan felt confused. He had never heard of humans being feared by alien hunters. Most humans on this colony stayed hidden, weak or untrained. "How do you know that?" he asked. Lyra's hands clenched together. "My husband served in the border guard," she said. "He once saw a human soldier fight 3 hunters alone and win." Her eyes filled with tears. "That is why he told me. If I ever needed help, I must find a human, any human. Because humans do not run from danger." Evan stared at the fire, feeling the weight of her words. He was not a soldier, not a fighter, not a hero. He was just a quiet man living alone in the snow. But Lyra looked at him like he carried something powerful inside him, something he himself did not believe he had. Evan stood up and walked to the door, curious and worried. There, he saw it. Fresh claw marks carved deeply into the wood. Marks that had not been there before the widow arrived. The lines were sharp and deep, made by something strong, something that wanted to get in. Lyra rushed to him, grabbing his arm. "They came," she whispered. "They followed us here." Evan's heart jumped. "Who are they?" Lyra looked at the floor, unable to meet his eyes. "Hunters," she whispered. "They killed my husband because he learned something he should not know." Evan felt cold inside, colder than the snow outside. Something in her voice told him the danger was bigger than he imagined. "What did he learn?" he asked. Lyra shook her head. I cannot tell you yet," she whispered. "If I say it now, you might throw us out, and my children will die." For the first time, Evan saw fear and guilt mixed together in her eyes. She was hiding something huge, something dark, something deadly, but she had no choice but to hide it. Her children's lives depended on it. Outside, a distant howl echoed through the storm, long and sharp. Evan and Lyra both froze. The hunters were searching again, and the night was far from over. Morning arrived slowly, but even daylight did not bring comfort. The snow outside was thick and heavy, hiding the ground and the danger beneath it. Evan stood at the window, his breath fogging the glass as he watched the quiet forest. He hoped the night's fear had ended, but deep inside, he knew it had only started. Lyra sat near the fire with her children, Sarah and Noak, trying to keep them warm. Their small faces still showed exhaustion. Their bodies still shivered from cold and fear. Evan brought them warm water, but Lyra's eyes stayed fixed on the door. Every sound made her flinch. Every gust of wind made her tighten her grip on her children. Evan had seen fear before, but not like this. This fear came from something real, Something dangerous, something that was not human. He walked outside for a moment, hoping the morning light would show nothing unusual, but instead, he found the same claw marks on the snow-covered ground, deep, wide, and fresh. They led from the woods to his door. Then back into the trees. Evan swallowed hard. Something had walked right up to his home, something that did not fear the cold or the storm, something hunting the widow and her children. He returned inside, closing the door tightly. "Lyra," he said quietly, "they were here." Again, Lyra lowered her head. "They never stop," she whispered. "They will search until they find us." Before Evan could ask more, Sira, the older child, tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama." "Are they coming back?" Lyra held her close. "Yes, child. But the human will protect us." Evan felt a strange weight on his shoulders. He was only one man living alone with an old rifle and a small shelter. He never imagined a mother and two alien children would trust him with their lives. Yet here he was, standing between them and something deadly. Suddenly, footsteps crunched outside, slow and heavy. Evan stiffened. Lyra gasped and pulled her children behind her. Evan moved to the window and carefully lifted the curtain just a little. His heart almost stopped. Two tall figures walked through the snow. Their bodies were armored in dark metal, their faces hidden under smooth masks. Their long arms ended in sharp, curved claws. They moved with confidence, like creatures who feared nothing. These were the hunters. Evan stayed perfectly still as they stopped near the trees. One of them lifted a strange device that glowed red, scanning the area. The others sniffed the air, its breath leaving a cold mist. Evan quietly whispered, "They're close." Very close. Lyra covered her mouth, trying not to make a sound. She held her children tight under her arms. Sira buried her face in her mother's shoulder, and Noak squeezed his eyes shut, shaking in fear. The hunters began to speak, their voices echoing through some mechanical device. "The widow is near," one said in a deep metallic tone. "We smell her fear." The second hunter pointed toward Evan's shelter. "The human home. Check there." Evan's blood turned cold. He stepped back from the window, his heart beating fast. He grabbed his rifle, although he knew it might not help much. Lyra's eyes filled with panic. "Evan, if they find us, they will take my children first," she whispered. "Please don't let them." Evan had no plan, no training, but he had instinct. He motioned for Lyra and the children to stay low and quiet. The hunters walked closer, their heavy steps getting louder, snow crunching under their feet like breaking bones. Evan held his breath as their shadows passed the window. For a moment, he thought they would break the door down. But then, they stopped, turned, and moved toward the back of the shelter, searching the area, sniffing the air, listening for any small noise. Lyra's hands shook so much she almost dropped her child. Evan placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent promise that he would not abandon them. Her eyes softened for a moment, but the fear stayed. Minutes passed like hours until the hunters finally walked away into the forest. Their voices faded, but their presence stayed like a dark stain in the air. Evan looked at Lyra. "You need to tell me everything now," he said. "Why are they really chasing you? What did your husband discover?" Lyra closed her eyes, pain filling her face. "Because he learned a secret. A secret the hunters kill to protect," she whispered. Outside the forest stayed quiet, too quiet. The hunters were not gone. They were only waiting for nightfall. And the next attack would be worse than before. Evan sat near the fire, his rifle leaning against his knee. He felt the heat on his hands, but inside, he was cold. The hunters had come too close, too easily, and they would return again. He looked at Lyra, who sat quietly holding her children. Her eyes were red from fear, but something else was there too, guilt. A heavy guilt she tried hard to hide. When the children finally fell asleep, Lyra covered them gently with blankets and walked to the other side of the room. Evan followed her with his eyes, sensing she was ready to say something important. Something she had avoided until now. She stood near the window, staring into the snow. "Evan," she whispered, "I did not tell you everything." He nodded slowly. "I know." Lyra took a long breath before turning to face him. Her hands trembled as she spoke. "My husband. He did not die in an accident." Evan stayed quiet, letting her speak. "He was murdered," she said softly, "murdered by the hunters. Because he saw something they wanted to hide forever." Evan felt a heavy pressure in his chest. The story was worse than he thought. What did he see? He asked. Lyra hesitated, fear rising in her eyes. He saw them taking children. Not just alien children, but human children too. Evan froze. Human children? Lyra nodded. They take them to the deep forest, where no one returns. Cold wave passed through Evan's body. He had heard old stories about missing settlers long ago, but no one ever found answers. People blamed storms, wild animals, or starvation. But now he wondered if something else had been happening all along, something dark and hidden. Lyra stepped closer to him, her voice shaking. "My husband followed them one night after hearing a child scream. He found a place. A hidden den, where the hunters kept children trapped." She swallowed hard. He tried to help, but there were too many hunters. They caught him, tortured him, and left him for dead. Evan clenched his fists, anger building inside him. Why didn't he tell someone? "He tried," Lyra said, "but no one listened. People feared the hunters. They feared knowing too much." She wiped a tear, and when they realized he knew their secret, "They came for us." Evan breathed slowly, trying to stay calm. "So that's why you ran," Lyra nodded. "Yes. I ran because they will not stop until we are all gone." For a moment, the room fell silent except for the popping of the firewood. The children slept peacefully, unaware of the danger waiting outside, unaware of the secret their father died protecting. Lyra looked at Evan again, her expression heavy with shame. "And there is another reason I came to you. Not just because you are human." Evan raised an eyebrow. "What reason?" Lyra lowered her head, her voice barely a whisper. "My husband told me, if anything ever happened, I should find a human with a good heart." She met his eyes. "Someone who would protect children, even if they were not his own." She stepped closer, her voice shaking. "Someone like you." Evan felt a strange warmth and confusion at the same time. "How do you know I'm that kind of person?" Lyra gave a sad smile. "Because when I looked at you, in the snow, you did not close the door." She placed a hand on her chest. "I knew then you would help us." Evan felt his throat tighten. He had always seen himself as normal, unimportant, a quiet man living alone in the cold. But Lyra looked at him like he was something more, something strong, something her children needed. Suddenly, a loud thud hit the wall outside. The whole shelter shook. Evan grabbed his rifle and ran to the door. Lyra's face turned pale. "They found us," she whispered. Another thud came, louder this time. Snow fell from the ceiling. The children woke and cried out. Lyra hugged them, fear clear in her eyes. "Evan, the hunters are here." Evan cocked his rifle, his heart pounding hard. He looked at Lyra, then at the trembling door. This was no longer just about helping strangers. This was personal now, and Evan knew he had to fight, no matter what waited. Outside, the first hit shook the entire shelter like a small earthquake. Snow fell from the wooden beams above, and the lantern hanging by the door swung wildly. Evan gripped his rifle tighter, his breath sharp and fast. Lyra held her children close, her arms wrapped around them as if she could shield them from everything outside. The second hit came even harder. The door shuddered, the hinges groaned, and tiny cracks appeared in the wood. Something massive was pushing against it, something strong enough to tear the door off if it tried a little harder. "Stay behind me," Evan whispered to Lyra. She nodded, but her eyes were full of fear. "Evan, they will break in." "I know," he said, raising his rifle, "but they will not take you. Not while I'm still standing." Lyra pressed her forehead against Sierra's and Noak's heads. Trying to keep them quiet, the children cried softly, but buried themselves deeper into her arms. Evan felt anger boiling in him now, not fear. Anger that these creatures wanted to take innocent children. Anger that they chased a mother to the ends of the snow. Anger that they thought they could break into his home and do whatever they wanted. A loud metallic voice echoed from outside. "Human. Give you the widow." Another voice followed, deeper and colder. "We will spare you if you obey," Evan shouted back. "Go to hell." The forest outside went silent for one heavy moment. Then, the hunters roared in fury. The door exploded. Inward, wood flying everywhere like sharp fragments. Evan fired instantly. The rifle cracked loudly. The bullet hit one of the hunters in the chest, causing it to stumble back into the snow. But the second hunter rushed inside, its claws slicing through the air like knives. Evan ducked just in time. The claw missed his face by inches, cutting through the wooden wall instead, splintering it open. Snow and wind poured into the room. The hunter turned its mask toward Evan, red eyes glowing behind the metal. Evan fired again, hitting its shoulder. The creature roared, but didn't fall. Lyra screamed, pulling her children beneath the table. Evan tried to keep the hunters' attention on himself. He backed away slowly, the creature following him with heavy steps. Its claws clicked together like metal teeth. "You won't touch them," Evan growled. The hunter lunged. Evan rolled aside, grabbing a burning log from the fire pit. He swung it with all his strength, smashing it against the hunter's face. Sparks flew as the burning wood struck the mask. The creature roared and staggered back. Blinded for a moment, the first hunter recovered outside, stepping through the broken door with slow, heavy steps. Evan's heart pounded. 2 against 1. He could fight. But he couldn't win a long battle inside this small shelter. They needed to escape, but how? Lyra crawled out from under the table and shouted, "Evan, the back window. We can run." Evan nodded quickly. "Take the children." She grabbed them, wrapping blankets around their small bodies. Sierra was crying. Noak was shaking. Lyra kissed their foreheads and lifted them to the window. WHAM. The blinded hunter charged again. This time Evan fired point blank. The shot hit its neck. Sparks bursting from its armor. The creature fell backward, thrashing in pain. Evan grabbed Lyra's arm, helping her push the children out the window into the snow outside. "Go!" he shouted. "Run!" Lyra climbed out, pulling the children with her. Evan turned around to face the second hunter, which was now stepping inside fully, its claws dripping with melting snow. He backed toward the window, rifle ready, but the hunter lunged again. Evan shot the lantern above. It shattered, flames dropping onto the ground, catching the wooden floor and spreading fast. Smoke filled the air. The hunter roared and stepped back, confused by the sudden fire. Evan jumped through the window into the snow, landing beside Lyra and the children. The flames inside the shelter grew brighter, lighting the trees around them. "We need to go now," Evan shouted. Lyra grabbed his hand tightly. "Where?" Evan looked at the burning shelter behind him, then at the dark forest ahead, full of snow and danger. "Into the woods," he said. "It's our only chance." Behind them, the hunters screamed through the smoke, and the chase began, faster and more deadly than ever before. Asterisk. The fire behind them rose fast, lighting the sky with orange smoke. Evan didn't look back again. He grabbed Lyra's hand and moved quickly into the thick forest. The snow was deep, their feet sinking with every step, but staying still meant death. The hunters were behind them, roaring through the smoke and fire, their metal voices echoing through the trees. Lyra carried Noak while Sierra held tightly onto Evan's coat. The children were cold and scared, but they tried hard not to cry. They knew tears would slow them down. And the hunters were too close for mistakes. Branches slapped against their faces as they pushed deeper into the woods. The wind howled around them, blowing snow into their path. Evan had lived in these woods for years. He knew the safe places, the dangerous paths, the frozen rivers, and the hidden caves. But running at night with children was different. Every step mattered. Behind them, the hunters' heavy steps shook the ground. They moved fast, faster than Evan expected. "The human runs," one of them growled. "The widow must not escape," the other replied. Lyra's breath shook. "They are too close." Evan squeezed her hand. "We will lose them, I promise." But promises were hard to keep in this forest. The snowstorm grew stronger, the air colder. Every breath felt like ice in their lungs. Evan led them toward a narrow path between tall trees, a place where the shadows hid everything. Even the moonlight struggled to reach the ground here. "Stay close," he whispered. "Don't let go." For a moment, the hunters' steps faded. The storm drowned out all sound. Evan slowed a little, letting the children breathe. Lyra placed Noak on the ground just long enough to adjust her grip. Her arms were shaking from carrying him. Suddenly, crack! A loud snapping sound echoed behind them. Sarah screamed and grabbed Evan's coat tighter. Lyra's eyes widened. "They found us." But Evan realized something else. It wasn't a hunter. It was the sound of ice breaking. He turned sharply. "To the left. We're going across the frozen river," Lyra gasped. "Evan, that is dangerous." "So is dying," he said. "Trust me." They reached the river's edge. The ice was thick but cracked in some places. Evan tested it with his foot. It held. "Walk slowly," he warned. "Don't run." They stepped onto the ice inch by inch. The surface groaned beneath them, but it did not break. Snow covered most of it, making it hard to see the weak spots. Evan kept Sarah close, helping her step across safely. Lyra came behind with Noak, halfway across the river. The hunters appeared again at the tree line, their glowing red eyes scanning the area. "There!" The first hunter shouted, pointing at the ice. "They crossed, stop them!" The second roared. The hunters stepped onto the river without hesitation. Their heavy feet cracked the ice instantly. Crack! Crack! C-R-A-C-K! Evan saw the ice beginning to split behind them. "Hurry!" he shouted. Lyra lifted Noak higher and rushed forward. Sarah ran with small steps, crying silently. The hunters pushed forward, their weight breaking the ice faster than. A massive crack split the river, a long jagged line racing across the surface. The ice under the hunters collapsed. Both hunters fell into the freezing water, roaring in rage as the river pulled them under. Their claws scratched at the ice edges, but the current dragged them down. Their voices echoed under the ice as they sank deeper. Evan pulled Lyra and the children onto the opposite riverbank. They fell into the snow, breathing hard, shaking from fear and cold. "They're gone?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling. "4. Now," Evan said, looking back across the cracking ice. "But hunters don't die easily." Lyra hugged her children tightly, tears in her eyes. "Evan, you saved us again." He shook his head. "We're not safe yet." He pointed deeper into the forest, toward a place only he knew. "There's a cave hidden in the cliffs. We can hide there until sunrise." Lyra placed her hand on his arm, her voice soft. "Evan, thank you for not leaving us." Evan looked at her and the children, their small bodies shaking in the cold. "I'm not leaving you," he said quietly. "Not now. Not ever." And together, they walked deeper into the frozen woods, not knowing the hunters had already started climbing out of the river on the other side, colder, angrier, and more determined than before. The forest grew darker as Evan led Lyra and the children toward the hidden cave. The wind whispered through the trees, blowing snow into long white curtains. The ground was uneven, rocks hidden beneath ice, but Evan kept moving, pushing branches aside, helping the children climb over fallen logs. Every sound behind them made him look back, afraid the hunters had returned already. Lyra stayed close, Sarah clinging to her side, Noak asleep in her arms. Their breaths fogged the air, their bodies shaking from cold and fear. Evan wanted to stop and rest, But he knew they couldn't. Not until sunrise. Not until they found safety, finally. They reached the stone cliff. A narrow opening hid behind thick bushes. Evan pushed the branches aside and led them inside. The cave was dark but dry, and far enough from the river that the hunters wouldn't find it easily. Lyra set the children down on soft moss and wrapped blankets around them. Evan gathered sticks and lit a small fire. The flames glowed gently, filling the cave with warm orange light. For the first time since the attack, the children relaxed, their small heads leaning against their mother as they drifted toward sleep. Evan sat near the fire, his body aching, his hands shaking from the long chase. Lyra watched him with soft eyes, then slowly moved to sit beside him. "You saved us again," she whispered. "I don't know how to thank you." Evan shook his head. "You don't need to. Anyone would have done the same." Lyra touched his arm gently. "No, not anyone. Many humans would have closed the door. Many would have refused." She looked at the children. "But you opened your home, even when you were afraid." Evan looked into the fire, his expression thoughtful. "I didn't do it because I'm brave," he said quietly. "I did it because I couldn't watch your children freeze." He took a slow breath. "I lived alone for years, Lyra. But the moment I saw you three in the snow, I felt something I haven't felt in a long time." Lyra tilted her head slightly. "What did you feel?" Evan swallowed. "Purpose." She didn't speak for a moment. Her eyes softened, filled with warmth and sadness at the same time. She placed her hand on top of his. "You are a good man, Evan," she whispered. "My husband told me. Humans with good hearts are rare, but he was wrong." She smiled faintly. "They are precious, not rare." Before Evan could answer, a deep echoing roar shook the forest outside. The cave walls trembled. Lyra gasped and covered the children. Protectively, Evan grabbed his rifle and stood near the entrance. "It's them," he said. "They climbed out of the river." Lyra's voice cracked. "Evan, they won't stop. They will chase us forever." Evan tightened his grip on the rifle. "Not if I stop them." But Lyra rushed forward, grabbing his coat. "No. They are too strong. You will die." Evan looked into her desperate eyes. "If I don't fight, they will take your children." She froze, tears rising. Sarah looked up from the blankets. "Human father." "Don't go," the words hit Evan like a warm knife to the heart. She had called him father, not by mistake, but because she already saw him as one. Evan felt his fear turn into something stronger, determination. He stepped outside the cave entrance and set 3 traps he had built earlier from branches, wire, and frozen stone. He positioned himself behind a large rock and waited. The hunters appeared minutes later, glowing red eyes searching the darkness. "The human hides," one growled. "The widow is near." The other hissed. Evan fired first. The bullet struck a trap rope, making a heavy log swing down and slam into the first hunter. It hit the ground hard, roaring in pain. The second hunter charged. Claws raised, Evan rolled aside and triggered another trap. A pile of frozen stones fell from the cliff wall, crushing part of its armor. The fight was fierce, desperate, and fast. Evan used every trick he knew, every memory from his time living in the wild. And finally, with one last swing of a burning stick, he struck the final hunter's mask, breaking it open. The creature fell, silent at last. Evan staggered back, exhausted, breathing hard. His body shook with pain, but he was alive. The hunters were gone. Lyra ran out of the cave and threw her arms around him. She held him tightly, crying into his chest. "You're alive, Evan. You're alive." Sarah and Noak wrapped their small arms around his legs. "Human father saved us," Sarah whispered. Evan hugged them gently, feeling something deep and warm inside him. Lyra lifted her face, tears shining in her eyes. "If you want, you can keep us," she whispered softly. "Not for protection, but as your family." She touched his cheek with trembling fingers. "And I will warm your bed. Not because I must, but because my heart chooses you." Vin looked at them, the widow and her children, and for the first time in years he smiled. "You're home now," he said softly, "all of you." And in the quiet cave, far from danger, their new future began, together, as a family born from fear, courage, and love.